walls had never been breached, not this time. For generations, the people of Wall Corinth believed themselves blessed. While other settlements fell to Titan onslaughts, Corinth remained untouched, its stone barriers unmarred by the grotesque hands of its enemies. But what seemed like divine protection was a veil hiding a secret so dark, so monstrous, that even the Titans themselves seemed to cower in its presence. Ilara, a young surveyor assigned to inspect Wall Corinth, had always been curious. Unlike other walls, Corinth emitted a low, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate through her bones. At night, when the wind was still, she could hear whispers, soft, indistinct voices that seemed to emanate from the very stone. When she reported this to Commander Jothan, her concerns were dismissed as exhaustion. But Ilara knew what she heard, and when she pressed her ear against the cold surface one evening, a single phrase slipped into her mind, clear and undeniable. They are watching. As the weeks went on, Ilara's curiosity grew into obsession. She began to notice strange behavior among the townsfolk. The children avoided playing near the walls. Merchants who ventured too close refused to speak about what they saw, their faces pale and eyes hollow. Her search led her to an abandoned crypt beneath the town, rumored to have been sealed off during Corinth's construction. Breaking through the rotted wooden door, she descended into darkness, her lantern casting flickering shadows on damp stone walls. The floor of the crypt was stained crimson. Symbols she didn't recognize were carved into every surface, pulsating faintly as if alive. In the center of the chamber lay a massive slab of black stone, its surface slick with fresh blood despite the crypt's abandonment. Ilara's breath hitched as a low growl echoed through the chamber. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, skeletal, its face an amalgamation of human and Titan features. Its voice was a guttural rasp. "You shouldn't be here." After narrowly escaping the crypt, Ilara sought answers from the town's elders. Reluctantly, they revealed Corinth's dark secret. Centuries ago, the town had made a pact with an ancient, forgotten entity. In exchange for protection from the Titans, Corinth offered a sacrifice, a living being, fed to the black stone every year. The stone, they said, was the heart of a Titan, and it demanded blood to remain dormant. But something had changed. The sacrifices were no longer enough. The whispers in the walls grew louder, and the townsfolk began disappearing at an alarming rate. Ilara's investigation uncovered a horrifying revelation. The walls themselves were alive. The stones were fused with the flesh and sinew of Titans, their consciousness trapped in eternal torment. The whispers she had heard were their desperate cries for release. As she delved deeper, Ilara learned the truth about her own lineage. Her bloodline was directly tied to the ancient entity. She wasn't just a surveyor, she was the key to breaking the pact, or sealing it forever. The climax of the story takes place during the Festival of Remembrance, a celebration meant to honor Corinth's survival. But as the townsfolk gathered, the walls began to tremble. Cracks appeared, and from within, grotesque forms began to emerge. Titans unlike any Ilara had ever seen, their bodies warped and fused with stone. The entity from the crypt revealed itself, demanding a final sacrifice, Ilara's life in exchange for the town's survival. Faced with an impossible choice, Ilara made a desperate decision, one that would either save humanity or doom it to an endless cycle of blood and betrayal. The Festival of Remembrance began like every year before it. Celebrations masked with forced smiles, the townsfolk gathering near the towering Wall Corinth. Ilara stood at the edge of the crowd, her chest tight as the crypt's secrets weighed heavily on her. The whispers in the walls had grown louder, no longer content with quiet murmurings. They called her name now, each syllable dragging her closer to the heart of the horror. Commander Jothan, oblivious to Alara's revelations, addressed the crowd with his booming voice. For generations, Wal Carinth has protected us. Today, we honor those sacrifices. But Alara knew the truth. Sacrifices weren't honored. They were consumed. She couldn't bear it anymore. Clenching her fists, she stepped forward to confront the gathered townsfolk, but a sudden tremor beneath her feet silenced the entire square. The ground cracked, and a low, guttural groan echoed from within the walls. The whispers turned into screams. Panic swept through the crowd as chunks of Wal Carinth began to break away, revealing something grotesque beneath. Massive, bloodshot eyes stared through cracks in the stone, and hands fused with jagged rock clawed outward. These weren't ordinary titans. They were a twisted amalgamation of flesh and Tress, their tortured forms radiating malice. Alara watched in horror as the walls began to bleed, a black, viscous liquid seeping from the cracks. The townsfolk screamed, scrambling for safety, but the titans were already emerging. One by one, they pulled themselves free, their bodies emitting an ear-splitting screech as they tore away from the stone. Their skin was jagged and raw, their faces distorted into permanent expressions of agony. Commander Jothan tried to rally the soldiers, but the Titans were unlike any the garrison had ever faced. They moved with terrifying speed, tearing through the ranks with jagged limbs. One soldier's scream was cut short as a stone-encrusted hand crushed his skull. Alara fled toward the crypt, knowing it was the only place where answers might lie. The entity's voice resonated in her mind as she descended into the darkness. You cannot stop this, but you can choose how it ends. The crypt was alive with pulsating energy. The black stone at its center glowed faintly, emitting a low hum that vibrated in her chest. The entity's form appeared again, its grotesque features illuminated by the stone's light. You were never meant to learn the truth, child, it rasped. But now that you have, the cycle must be completed. Alara demanded answers, her voice trembling with fury. Why me? Why now? The entity explained that the Titans of Carinth were not created by accident. They were the result of humanity's desperation. Wal Carinth had been built as a prison, trapping these aberrations within. But the sacrifices had weakened the seal, and now only a life tied to the pact could restore it. Alara realized the horrifying truth. Her bloodline had been chosen centuries ago to maintain the pact. Her ancestor had made the deal, and now it fell to her to either honor it or break it. I won't give you my life, she spat, defiant. The entity laughed, a sound like grinding stone. You misunderstand. This is not a choice, it is destiny. As the Titans rampaged through the town above, Alara faced an impossible decision. If she sacrificed herself, the seal would hold, and Carinth would remain protected, for now. But if she refused, the Titans would be free to destroy everything, and the cycle of blood and betrayal would end in ashes. Alara stepped toward the stone, her mind racing. She thought of the townsfolk, their fear and ignorance. She thought of the horrors she had uncovered, the voices of the trapped Titans crying out for release. But she also thought of the greater world, the other walls, the endless battles against the Titans. Perhaps this cycle was not hers to break, but to expose. With one final act of defiance, Alara plunged her knife into the black stone. The entity's scream echoed through the crypt, and the walls above began to crumble. The Titans, now free from their prison, turned their attention away from the town and toward the world beyond. Alara's vision blurred as the crypt collapsed around her. Her last thought was a grim hope that the truth would finally come to light. Months later, remnants of Wall Corinth lay scattered across the plains, now a graveyard of twisted stone and flesh. The Titans had moved on, leaving the town in ruins. Survivors whispered of Ilara's sacrifice, her defiance, and the new horrors unleashed upon the world. Far beyond the horizon, the Titans of Corinth marched toward the remaining walls, their forms towering and grotesque, their cries echoing through the lands. And among them walked the entity, its laughter carrying on the wind. The cycle continues.